Hi, it's Steph, and another of my portrait videos for you this week on the Sky Arts Portrait of the Week challenge. Um, it was sitter Nihal Arthanayake, apologies for pronunciation if I've got that wrong, and artist Dorian Radu, and this is my version, which I'll come to in a second. Uh, Going back to the live stream, you never know kind of how good or interesting these sort of paint-alongs are going to be, because a lot depends on how the artist and the sitter interact. This week was probably one of my favourite ones, just because, I don't know, Dorian and Nihal, they just kind of had such a rapport, and yeah, it was just fascinating to watch. And I've mentioned before, when you do get to watch these live streams, it's a massive bonus to be able to see the artist doing their work. It's something that you kind of very rarely get to see. Most artists sort of work in solitude, so to be able to see their process, and I think sort of Sky Arts have picked their artists really carefully, because they are all so different, and Dorian was no exception. And yeah, it was a joy to watch him work. I mentioned on last week's video how some artists like to kind of grid off their canvas, and they'll sort of work quite carefully. Dorian was the complete opposite. So yeah, no grids from what I could see, no measuring, no mark making. He was just straight in with a brush and oil paints. And again, I've done lots of portrait videos, and I've spoken about my process and how I sort of methodically work my way around the face, which is just my way. I know other artists that do the same, but I know other artists that work very differently. And watching Dorian tackle his portrait of Nihal, as I say, no measuring. And he kind of started up here, forehead, and he did an eye, and then he just kind of worked out, which is not too dissimilar to my method, and you'll see how my version of Nihal kind of grows, and it does start from here. I think it starts from here and goes out. So yeah, it was brilliant watching him. The other real bonus of these live streams is getting to know the sitter, and this does largely depend on how talkative they are and what they talk about. Nihal was great, and one of the things that both Dorian and Nihal were talking about was they were just talking about as a portrait artist, what they try and portray when they're doing a portrait, and that was fascinating, because hearing Dorian speaking, he, rather than just to get a likeness, he tries to get inside the person he's painting, and he wants to get as much out of that as possible, so it's not just like a photographic likeness of a person. And for me and all the other people that are watching these shows, to get that little 4-hour window into the sitter, it so helps me to, I knew of Nihal, but I didn't really know that much of him. So for me to kind of do this, doing it after watching that 4-hour live stream, I could put a lot of that information into this, just because of all the things that he was talking about. So as I say, it was a great one to watch. So if you've not watched it, do kind of check out their live stream. My version of Nihal, it was a challenge for lots of different reasons. I spoke last week with the one I did of Annie Mac. Last week I used a lot of old maps, which is something that I don't use an awful lot of, just because as a collage item to draw on top of, they can be quite busy. And sometimes you can't quite see what you're doing because you've got that battle with the background being a bit too obvious. And I did want to do something a little bit different for Nihal, just because, you know, again, listening to him speak, he was speaking a lot about his love of graffiti. You know, there's the obvious sort of musical influences as well with Nihal. So I wanted to do something a little bit urban, and I did want to throw a bit of colour at it. So I got the maps out again. I've found a few sort of maps of his local area, which, you know, because he's from Manchester, all the maps that I've got with Manchester on are really busy and complicated. So that was a battle. I've got a few sort of old scraps of like paper that I've printed on. I've found some lovely sort of big chunky text, and I've thrown a little bit of sheet music in, as I like to do. So I probably spent the longest amount of time doing the collage bit that I've done with these. Sometimes the collage bit for me is pretty quick, because all I'm doing really is getting rid of that white paper. I spent a fair amount of time playing around with this one, just because, you know, I wanted to do something a little bit different. And so I did collage, and as I did with the Annie Mac one last week, I have tried to sort of tone it down by sort of wiping a lot of acrylic over it, just because it was too busy. As far as the portrait goes, again, last week I spoke about the fact that shock horror, I'd been using a pencil. I did do this time as well, and I said last week I was sketching because I wasn't quite feeling it last week. This week it was for a different reason. I think it was because this background, there's areas of this background that it's still insanely busy and complicated, and it was a real struggle to actually see what I was doing. And, you know, you kind of making marks on here, and you're struggling to see whether it's a mark you've made with your pencil or pen, or whether it's an actual motorway. There's quite a major motorway that goes through Nihal's eye here, which, you know, I quite like happy accidents and random, and sometimes it works great, sometimes it can be a bit of an issue. I had bits of both of that with this. So I did do a lot of sketching before I went in with the pen, and if Nihal does get to see this video, you might watch it, you might not. Nihal, your beard was a nightmare to draw. I think more so with an ink pen. I've spoken about the joys and pitfalls of working with ink pen. You know, you can't rub it out. All you're doing is adding all the time, which makes sort of a beard like Nihal's got there quite a challenge, and that was. So my white ink pen came in quite handy too. The other thing that I've done a bit differently with this one, I've not done it with any of my other portraits that I've put on YouTube. I noticed that when I was putting this together, because as with all my others, it is just drawn with an ordinary biro, and because the collage it's from lots of different materials, the map that I've used is quite shiny paper, but then compared with sort of old sheet music, that's a different texture completely. And I've scraped acrylic over it, which again, that was another different texture. It meant that the pen reacted really differently on some areas of this, which again was a little bit frustrating. I noticed that just where it was just drawing on the map, and especially areas where it was fairly solid black, the ink pen, because there was an awful lot of biro on the paper, it was getting all horribly sort of shiny, which I didn't really like. So what I've done is I've used a few of these sort of graphic ink pens, and I've blocked a lot of the ink in, and you know, these pens do run if you wet them. So what I've done is I've kind of used a wet brush and I've picked up a lot of that ink just to tone things down a little bit. So yeah, a little bit of a different process for me, just because I was trying to compete with all the busy collage that I'd put on there. So there you go. Other thing, I spoke last week about music. This was painted in fairly long time. Took me, I don't know, probably about 4 or 5 hours. And I stuck Sam Fender on for this one. So if you want to get in the mood, put some Sam Fender on. So there you go. I shall let you now see me doing Nihal from start to finish in about 4 minutes. So enjoy, and I shall see you next week. All right then, bye bye.